Great. Okay, so welcome to the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing RFP info session. This meeting is brought to you by King County's Department of Community and Human Services and also the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing Community Advisory Committee. Closed captioning is available. It's machine operated, so it's not 100% accurate, but you can turn it on or off at any point by going to the More option on your menu bar and selecting Live Transcript. So our presenters include Kristen Pula, Jim Gayton, Joanna Armstrong, and myself, Yasmin Perez from DCHS, and also Suzette Espinoza Cruz, a Skyway resident and Community Advisory Committee member. In this session, we will introduce the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing. We'll review the criteria and key components of the RFP. We'll provide additional information to support potential applicants, and we'll have time for live question and answer. So this is our agenda. After the welcome, we'll review the fund's origin and background, and then review the core aspects of the RFP. We'll have about 20 minutes for Q&A following the RFP presentation, but if you have questions during the presentation, feel free to drop any questions into the chat. After the Q&A, we'll review some important information about submitting your RFP and the RFP review process and timeline. And we should have time for any closing questions at the end. So I'm going to hand it over to Suzette and we will start the presentation. Suzette, are you on?
There I am.
Oh, great.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So what is the Skyway $5 million Fund for affordable housing? So I'm just going to cover this a little bit. This fund will support equitable community-driven development of new affordable housing units located in the Skyway-West Hill, my neighborhood. Skyway-West Hill is an area of unincorporated King County that borders Seattle to the north, Tukwila to the west, and Renton to the south. Skyway is a neighborhood that is majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and is experiencing increasing displacement pressure from rising housing costs. And the purpose of this fund is to invest $5 million in support of equitable, community-driven, affordable housing development located in the Skyway-West Hill neighborhood. In particular, this fund is designed to support projects that are being led and stewarded by community-based organizations with strong ties to the neighborhood. This funding is the first county investment in affordable housing in Skyway-West Hill in over a decade. Next slide, please. This fund is a result of years of community organizing. Skyway advocates worked with council member Zehalai to secure $5 million for affordable housing from the 2021-22 Housing and Community Development Biennial Budget. There are two fund sources that make up the $5 million, each with different requirements and restrictions around income levels that the housing must serve. One is the short-term lodging tax. The other is the 1406 sales tax. I'm going to kick it over to Yasmin.
Thanks, Suzette. So the primary objectives for the fund are to invest in affordable housing that can serve Skyway-West Hill residents that are vulnerable to displacement and community members who have already been displaced. It's also, another objective is to align with anti-displacement recommendations that were made by the executive in the Skyway-West Hill and North Highline Anti-Displacement Strategies report that was completed in September of 2021. The third objective is to invest in equitable and community-driven development projects that build wealth and financial stability in historically underserved communities. And the last objective is to provide seed funding to community-driven affordable housing projects that are in the early stages of development, and to support community-based organizations that are conducting pre-development and acquisition and/or construction activities. And we'll get into some more explanations of what we mean by that a little bit later in the presentation. So I'll hand this back to you, Suzette.
So we are proud to say that this RFP was developed collaboratively with Skyway community members like myself. 2 public meetings with community members helped define the fund's uses and the direction of the RFP. And a diverse community advisory committee made up of 8 current and former residents, many of whom grew up in the neighborhood, helped develop the RFP values, criteria, application questions, and scoring rubric. The committee members are rooted in communities most impacted by displacement and represented a diverse set of ethnic and cultural backgrounds, and included parents, artists, advocates, renters, and homeowners. Next slide, please. The RFP is a values-driven document and is intended for applicants and projects that align with the RFP's values. These values were created by the Community Advisory Committee. The first is lead with equity and social justice. We value efforts that honor First Nations and BIPOC community members and will prioritize projects that are explicit about addressing systemic racism and the institutional barriers that exist for communities of color and other marginalized community. Next is center families, elders, and youth. We support efforts which most likely will bring improvements to the lives of families, elders, and youth who are impacted by displacement. I was at uplifting projects that support the community's top 10 priorities. So we respect the time and energy Skyway-West Hill residents have put into sharing housing projects that are working to support or address the priorities identified by Skyway-West Hill residents in the community's top 10 list in the Skyway-West Hill sub-area plan, and that's on page 108 of that plan. Community empowerment. We believe in community power and self-determination and are committed to funding projects that are community-driven, build the community's capacity and leadership, and demonstrate long-term investment in the Skyway-West Hill community. And the next is build infrastructure for community development. We believe in investing in projects that are powered by community vision and are working for systems change. We value being an early investor in community-led solutions. Community benefit. We value projects that are committed to maximizing benefits to the residents of Skyway-West Hill throughout the process and are explicit and intentional about how their projects will employ people from the community and prioritize current residents. Anti-displacement focused. We believe and value projects that are creating affordable housing using an anti-displacement approach and will prioritize projects that affirmatively market to Skyway-West Hill residents who are most at risk of displacement and those who have already been displaced from Skyway-West Hill. And last is environmental justice. Skyway-West Hill has long experienced exposure to toxic pollution, contamination, and environmental injustice. We value projects that have innovative development and design approaches to preserve and increase trees and tree canopy, reduce emissions through green building techniques, and increase green spaces. Next, we'll hear from Kristen.
Thanks, Suzette. So who can apply for these funds? Now we want to turn for a few minutes to go over the minimum requirements for applicants. Because this fund is intended to support community-driven projects in various stages, the applicants do not need to have prior development experience or a development partner identified in order to be eligible to apply. Applicants also do not need to have identified a site or obtained site control in order to apply. However, applicants must meet the following minimum requirements to be considered for funding. The applicant must be a nonprofit organization that is a community-based organization or CBO located in Skyway-West Hill, or a CBO with a history of providing programs or services specifically designed to serve Skyway-West Hill residents, or third, a nonprofit developer or organization working in partnership with a CBO that meets one of the first two criteria. The proposed project must be an affordable housing capital project that includes income restricted housing for the following income levels. And this is based on our fund source restrictions, and it should be noted that projects that intend to serve lower income levels may be prioritized for funding. So for rental housing, units must serve households with incomes at or below 60% of the King County area median income, which for last year is approximately $69,000 for a family of 4. And for affordable homeownership projects, units must serve households with incomes between approximately 50, well, starting at 50 up to 80% of area median income. You cannot go over 80% of AMI, which is $92,000 for a family of 4 in last year's figures. And there is a link in the RFP guidelines to the King County 2021 AMI rent levels as published by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Another requirement, the location of the proposed affordable housing project must be in the Skyway-West Hill area of King County. And the RFP also includes a link to a map of Skyway-West Hill. And last, the applicant must have a record of demonstrating organizational, racial, and social equity values. And there are questions in the application that each applicant must answer for that criteria. And now we will go back to Yasmin.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, so what kind of projects is this RFP intended for? So these examples are not an exhaustive list of possible applicants, but hopefully this helps illustrate the intended audience for this RFP. So the first example is a community-based organization, or CBO for short, that is located in Skyway-West Hill or has strong ties to Skyway-West Hill and is looking for a site for an affordable housing project. The community-based organization is led by and for Skyway-West Hill community members that are at highest risk for displacement, such as Black, Indigenous, and people of color, queer and trans Black, Indigenous, and people of color, renters, and/or low-income households. The CBO has done inclusive community planning around anti-displacement and has a clear and compelling vision for an affordable housing project. The CBO is seeking resources to find and identify potential sites for their project and conduct feasibility and due diligence studies to assess and acquire the best site for their project. The second example is a CBO located in or with strong ties to Skyway-West Hill that already has site control. The community-based organization serves Skyway-West Hill community members at highest risk for displacement and has been leading an inclusive community-led planning process around redeveloping a site that they own or have site control of into affordable housing. The CBO has a clear and compelling vision for their project and is seeking resources to assess feasibility and complete their site planning and pre-development work. The third example is a values-driven nonprofit affordable housing developer is working in partnership with a CBO located in or with strong ties to Skyway-West Hill, and they are looking for a site for their project. The CBO serves Skyway-West Hill community members at highest risk for displacement. The CBO and the nonprofit developer have been conducting inclusive community-led planning and have a clear and compelling vision for an affordable housing project. The partners are in the process of developing an equitable partnership agreement and ownership structure for the project. And the partnership is interested in several parcels and is seeking resources to assess and acquire the best site for their project. So to boil it all down, we're looking for applicants that meet the minimum requirements and have strong ties to Skyway-West Hill and are aligned with the RFP values, have a clear and compelling project concept, have capacity to carry out the near-term project work, and can describe how they would use the funds from this fund to further their project. And I'll pass it to Kristen.
Thanks, Yasmin. So what can the awards be used for? There are two main categories. Awards can be made for first pre-development of up to $500,000 maximum per project. And then second, awards can be made for acquisition and or construction up to $2 million maximum per project. So applicants can apply for one use, or they can apply for both pre-development and acquisition construction for a maximum of $2.5 million per project. In the pre-development category, funds can be used for costs, including but not limited to hiring a broker to help identify potential sites, completing due diligence studies to see if the site is suitable for affordable housing project, fees to hire consultants such as a development consultant, architect, engineer, lawyers, as well as costs associated with site control and land holding. For acquisition and or construction, funds can be used to pay for the property. They can be used for legal fees, land holding costs, and if the acquisition is for an existing building with occupants, funds can also be used to do health and safety inspections on that building as well as repairs. And funds can be used for rehabilitation of an existing building to develop new units, as well as hard costs for construction. So we anticipate with the funding that we have in this RFP, we anticipate funding 2 to 3 projects total. And we intend to support at least one affordable homeownership project and at least one affordable rental project. And now I think we're at the place in the meeting where we're going to pause here and take questions, because we've just provided a lot of information. So we'd like to open it up now for any questions you all might have on things we've talked about so far. And you're welcome to either unmute and ask your question or put it in the chat.
We have our first question in the chat. It says, is this also for renovating existing properties or for constructing new properties?
Yasmin, where are you going?
Yeah, I was going to jump in, but you can feel free to correct me if
Go ahead.
Say anything wrong, Kristen. So great question. The funds are intended to develop new affordable housing units. But if acquisition includes acquisition of an existing building, then funding from this fund could support rehabilitation of that building to develop new units on that site or to redevelop that property.
There's another question about what is meant by affordable rental and homeownership projects.
So the affordability levels are what we went over in terms of rental. You have to serve people at or below 60% of area median income. And so that link is now in your chat. And for homeownership projects, affordable housing is defined as projects that serve people at 80% of area median income and below. Does that answer your question?
No, not exactly. What I was getting at is that, especially for the home ownership project, are you supporting that the CBO has ownership of that property and that they put someone of low income into that property to live? I don't understand what you mean.
I missed the very tail end, but in terms of home ownership, typically those are sold to the owner. So you don't have to own it, but you could have like a land trust model where the CBO or a nonprofit developer does own the land and you sell the units. And so yes, then the units have to be owned and occupied by households earning that specific income level that puts them at 80% or below of median income.
Okay, so the organization that I'm representing, they have a first-time home buyers workshop where they support people in how to go about becoming a homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to figure out how that would relate to this grant.
Okay. So they do, the organization does education and support of the home buyers. So that's a great question. These funds can only be used for capital. So the parts to construct, they have to be used to construct the units. So unfortunately, this funding cannot be used for that type of outreach and education activities. It's actually for pre-development and acquisition of an actual building or property.
Okay, so that's still not what I think I'm not explaining it correctly. So never mind.
No, go again.
Okay. So if we had someone from our educational workshop that was ready to purchase a home in the Skyway area, I'm trying to figure out how we could help that person to, it's not capital, never mind.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Yasmin, but I think that's right. It's this program. We have other, in our full housing finance program, we do have funding that can support purchase assistance for homeowners. I think that might be more along the lines of what you're asking, but these dollars have to be used for the capital, for the actual acquiring and building, putting the site together. So I think that that's right. So these dollars cannot be used for the purpose you're talking about.
But if we were acquiring a home and then prepared it so that someone of low income or that fits that demographic, if we owned the home and renovated it and got it prepared and they bought it, is that something that this funding would somehow fund?
I think that is going to be a hard one. I don't want to say that it couldn't be. If you are acquiring a property, it's possible, but it sounds like you're talking about more of a single family type property. So I think in terms of being competitive for funding in this pool, we're looking more toward multiple units.
Mhm,
So
okay.
like if you were acquiring, for instance, like a 4 or an 8 unit complex that you were going to turn into home ownership, yes, that's definitely eligible, because you're going to acquire that and rehabilitate it to turn it into low income home ownership. If you're talking about just like one single family house, that's not going to be as competitive.
Okay, so if it was a multi plex kind of building and we were renting it out, we would be the company that rented it. They would rent from us?
Correct.
And that would be okay?
You could acquire it and own it and rent it out, yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks for continuing and following up on that question. It's important.
I realized that I wasn't asking it properly, but I'm just a writer. I'm not the program.
I hear you. Thank you.
There are a couple questions about partnerships and sponsorships. One being if a CBO can apply with a fiscal sponsor, and then the second being if a CBO can partner with a local church.
Yeah, great questions. A CBO with a fiscal sponsor is allowed to apply for the RFP. There is, in the attachments, you would be asked to submit a letter confirming your fiscal sponsorship agreement with your fiscal sponsor. And the second question about partnering with a local church. Yes, that also would be a eligible partnership as long as you meet the other minimum criteria. I don't think I see any other questions in the chat, but if anyone has another question, feel free to unmute, or you can put questions in the chat if you prefer.
Yeah, here I go again. So if you already own an apartment complex, how, and it's for low income people, it has to be in the Skyway area. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. You also mentioned strong ties to the Skyway-West Hill area. What does that mean? Does the organization have to be come from that area, or what do you mean by strong ties to the area? We have strong ties to the community in that area, but I just want to be clear on what you mean by that.
Thanks. Yeah, that is also a great question. And we tried to provide some definition for that in the RFP. So we've primarily defined it as a community-based organization that is either located in Skyway-West Hill or has a history of providing services or programs specifically designed to serve Skyway-West Hill residents. But I think if in your application, you also can share, sort of how you define your relationship to the community as well, but that's how we've defined it in the RFP.
Because some of the people that we serve come from that area, but I don't know what percentage of them would come from there. Okay.
Yeah, having a strong connection to that community and that in the geographic neighborhood is a sort of heavily weighted component of the application. So it is something that we want to know a lot about, and are expecting to see that as sort of a minimum criteria as well.
Hi, my name is Tracy Jones Ross, and I'm from Shepherd's Transformation Mansion. We'll be there soon. But thank you for the platform. My question is, the demographic that we're looking for, I hope it's youth. Is it youth and adults that we're working on the main priorities? Because we do have a program for scattered community for all of them, but I just want to make sure that we're touching on the base of the priorities in that area. And also one more question before you answer that one. The young lady that's talking, I would love the partnership with you. And that way you can go ahead and get in with Skyway. We all not compete with each other, but we can all help the community all at once.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks for your questions, Tracy. I think so. The in the RFP values, there's a priority on projects that will support families, youth, and elders. There's not a restriction in terms of the minimum criteria of the demographics of who the project has to serve. There's in the RFP values, there's some more language around priorities around serving Skyway-West Hill, current Skyway-West Hill residents and residents who have been displaced, and affirmatively marketing to those members of the community in your project. So it doesn't have to specifically be just focused on young people or elders, but there are some values and priorities around particularly community members who are directly impacted by displacement, including families, youth, and elders.
Sounds wonderful. So on our scattered community, we can mix our programs. Like for instance, can we have the 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms are for our youth foyer, and in the back, our 3 and 4 bedrooms are for our low income and very low income and homeless families. Could that work, or you want them separate programs? That's the main thing I want to make sure.
I don't think there's anything in the RFP that really requires, has any requirements around that. It's mostly around making sure that the project meets the minimum criteria, and then explaining how your project aligns with the RFP values based on what your project concept is.
Awesome, that makes me even more excited. Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? If there are not more questions right now, we can move into the next part of the presentation where we get into some of the kind of more logistical components about the RFP and the proposals. And then we'll have time for additional questions before we close. So last invitation for any questions at this time. All right, I'm gonna move to the next slide then and ask Joanna to take over.
All right, thank you all for your great questions. We'll have some more time at the end after we walk through some of the process steps for more questions. So my name is Joanna Armstrong. I use she, her pronouns, and I'll be your RFP coordinator. So if you have any questions that come up throughout the process, you're welcome to reach out to me and email me with any questions. So there are 2 ways that your proposal can be submitted. So the first one is through the Zoom Grants website, which you see here, and Carson has put the link in the chat if you want to go look at that right now. And this is a website that will walk you through all of the questions, all the requirements and attachments that we need to have a complete proposal. And if you'd prefer to use email instead of Zoom Grants, you're also welcome to do that. If you are submitting your application via email, we do recommend that you download all the RFP documents, which you can find in the library tab of Zoom Grants, and just carefully read everything to make sure everything in your email is complete, so that we're receiving a complete proposal. And proposals are due by 1 p.m. Pacific time on Monday, March 28th. And the reason we have it in the middle of the day is so that we can provide any technical assistance or help you out if there's any issues that come up in the last minute. And just keep in mind that late proposals and incomplete proposals may not be accepted.
I'm Jim Geaton. I'm the Contracts and Procurement Manager for DCHS, he, him pronouns, and I'm supporting Kristen, Yasmin, Joanna, and the rest of the county staff on this procurement. What we have here is a snapshot of the picture you guys are likely to see of the heading on Zoom grants when you start your application. I just want to go a few of these tabs. At the top, there is a Show Library tab. This is where you can access all the documents that have been uploaded to Zoom grants that Joanna just described. We do highly recommend that you review each of these documents carefully. They will provide a bunch of information on what you need to do to put together a comprehensive competitive procurement, and we'll walk you through all of the questions that you're going to have to ask as well. Below that, there are 4 tabs that you need to click on in order to complete. Just so you're aware, the order does not matter. You can answer these in any order you want. You can start one, come back to it later. Zoom Grants doesn't care. You can do it in any order until you submit it. The first highlighted here is the applicant information. It is unscored and is primarily just consists of contact information for your organization. The second is for information on the type of project you're proposing and some additional information about your organization. Also included on that tab is a statement that if awarded, your organization will comply with a King County executive order requiring certain workers of county contractors be vaccinated against COVID-19. The only thing I want to make clear about that is you are not saying that you are currently in compliance with that executive order, and you are not admitting by clicking I understand that the order even applies to your organization. It may not. It is just a recognition that the order exists and that if required, you would comply with it at some future date. The next 2 tabs are the main part of the application. The proposals question tab is a series of narrative or long answer questions. The areas of information we ask about include some additional background on your organization, more information on your project, how that project is tied to the Skyway-West Hill community, and the values that are listed in the procurement. And then lastly, we ask about the capacity of your organization to complete your project. The way Zoom Grants works is you'll get a text box in which to write your answers. What we're recommending is that you write your answers in a Word document separate from Zoom Grants, and then copy and paste those answers into Zoom Grants when your answers are final. You'll also know, well, you should also know that every time you tab out of one of the Zoom Grants box or go to a different tab, it automatically saves your application. So if you do copy and paste something, tab to something else, click on something else before you close it. That way you'll make sure the system will save your answer and won't get lost. Your responses to the proposal questions should not be longer than 12 pages total. We do allow you to add some additional attachments if there is additional information you want to provide that you can reference in those answers. Finally, other required attachments. These are documents that you will need to upload into Zoom Grants upon completion. They include an organizational chart for the leadership of your organization, financial statements for your organization, a proposed project work plan, and a project budget. And I think the budget is a template that's provided in the library, which is another reason it's really important to go to that part of the Zoom Grants. Lastly, there's also a community reference form that will need to be submitted by your reference directly to DCHS. Next. Scoring and evaluation, we just want to sort of review a few of the things that happen after you submit your proposal. There are a few different stages listed here, but generally this is where we look through all of the materials that have been provided in a timely fashion in order to determine which project or projects DCHS should fund. The first stage listed is an administrative review. There, we're just trying to make sure that the proposal complies with the administrative requirements of the RFP. After that, qualifying proposals are moved to scoring by an evaluation panel on a 0 to 10 point basis. In the RFP, there is a table that includes, describes generally how those scores will be assigned. Members of the review panel will review and score proposals individually, but we will have a meeting of panel members to ensure that each of the folks reviewing the proposals have the same understanding of what you guys are proposing. They don't have to agree on a score, but we do want to make sure that they agree on what is being proposed. Once scores have been assigned, what we're going to do is average the scores from each panel member for each scored question or attachment, and then add up those individual weighted scores together to get to final scores. We also may ask applicants to participate in an oral interview as part of the scoring process. If the review panel chooses to do this, we will work individually with applicants to schedule that at a mutually agreeable time. When scores are finalized, the review panel then makes a recommendation to the DCHS director. Final awards are determined based on a number of factors being considered, including the score, equity, and geographic considerations. Next. Joanna will talk about some important dates.
Thank you. So what you see in front of you is the RFP timeline for the process. You can see we launched on January 19th, which was the first day that you could apply. And some notable dates for you is March 14th is the final day to ask any questions about the RFP, or at least substantive questions. If you have technical questions, we can help all the way up until the due date. But for any substantive questions, we want to take time to go back to our community members and our subject matter experts and make sure we've got complete answers for everyone, so that, and then share those answers with all applicants so everyone has access to the same information. And March 14th is also the last day to submit a request for grant writing consultant assistance, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You can get assistance with writing your application, but they do need some time to be able to help review and provide guidance for you. And again, proposals are due by 1 p.m. Monday, March 28th. And we also, if you open up the RFP, we've got a long list of the other timelines after the due date, including when we'll be reviewing and doing our evaluations, providing award recommendations, and then when we estimate the award selection and notification will be. And if we have any changes at all to this timeline, we will post an amendment to the RFP, which you'll be able to find in the Zoom Grants library. Next slide. Do we have Communities Rise here to discuss the grant writing consultant assistance?
Yeah, so we are excited to be partnering with Communities Rise to offer up to 1 hour of grant writing assistance with experienced consultants. Information on how to access this assistance is detailed in the RFP guidelines and the application document. And we'll also drop a link in the chat. And I think Amy is here from Communities Rise, so we can hand it over to Amy to share a little bit more about the program and the types of support applicants can receive.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. I'm Amy Kawai. I use she, they pronouns. I'm from Communities Rise. We are a capacity building organization that works with small CBOs and BIPOC, particularly located in BIPOC communities. So we are offering support on this RFP. That's one-on-one support in a clinic style setting with our consultants. And so it'll be an hour of support with an individual. You can either go through a draft, you can talk through some questions, brainstorm. There's a lot of different ways that folks will use this time with a consultant, or you can do like a final review of your draft as well. I actually think 2 of our consultants are on here. So Judy and Ton, if you want to wave or say hi or something.
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to work with Community Rise, offer some technical assistance. I really encourage CBOs to just take advantage of this service, even if it's just like you're well versed on it. It's always good to have another set of eyes and just support, and you don't. So looking forward to meeting some of the CBOs and getting to know your work more.
Hi, everybody. Likewise, I agree with Ton. It's a pleasure to work with all of you and with Communities Rise.
Thank you. And then there will be one more, Paul. So what will happen is if you fill out the intake form, which we can drop in the chat and is in the RFP materials as well, then we will pair you with a consultant to work on this project with you. Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. And thank you, Judy and Tom, for being here today. So lastly, we want to reiterate that it's important to review all the RFP documents carefully. You can download them from the library tab in Zoom Grants. Keep in mind there are multiple documents. So there's RFP guidelines, the RFP application, there's a glossary, there's a frequently asked questions sheet, and there's also an executive summary. A second info session will take place on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. We'll be sharing the same information as today's session. So if you've attended today, you don't need to attend the second info session, but if there are other folks on your team who you would like to attend, please have them register for the info session at the same link that you registered for this info session. Now that this process is in the live procurement stage, we do have a formal process for communicating any questions or concerns about the RFP. Please direct all questions to Joanna Armstrong, our RFP coordinator, at DCHScontracts@kingcounty.gov. And that concludes our presentation, but we have time for any last questions. So feel free to ask a question about anything that was presented or any questions, any clarifying questions about the RFP. I'm scrolling through to see if anyone has a hand raised or anything like that. I don't see anyone. If there are no other questions, then we can end a little bit early and give you back a few minutes of your time. Thank you again for your interest in the Skyway $5 million Fund for Affordable Housing RFP. Look forward to receiving your proposals. And please be in touch through our DCHS contracts@kingcounty.gov email if you have any additional questions. Thanks, everyone, and I will stop recording.